And so one day a race of hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings built themselves a gigantic supercomputer called Deep Thought to calculate once and for all the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. For 7.5 million years, Deep Thought computed and calculated and eventually announced that the answer was, in fact, 42.
Hello and welcome to every single sci-fi film ever. I'm Aisha Khan. Today we are taking a massive detour because it is episode number 42 of the podcast. My partner said to me around 6 months ago, don't you want to be doing something special for episode number 42? And so he gets a producer credit on this episode just for coming up with the idea. We won't be talking about the film today, we'll be talking about the general phenomena of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I have two absolutely amazing fans of the franchise joining me today. First up is Michael Newton, who is University Lecturer at Leiden University for the Centre of Arts and Society. He is a cultural historian who's written about many topics, including film, as well as being editor of the book, The Origins of Science Fiction. Welcome to the show, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm not panicking. I'm
Wonderful.
happy to be here. Hi, Mark.
Good. Joining Michael is Mark Steadman, who's a creative digital producer, a long-time podcaster, and was the host of the Beware the Leopard podcast, which went through an A to Z of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Welcome to the show, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm just this guy, you know.
Oh.
So you've both made references, and we haven't spoken about anything
Yes.
yet. One is Don't Panic, two is Zaphod Beeblebrox, but we will get to them later. Let's start off with Michael, your personal experience of this franchise. When were you first exposed to it, and why is it one of your absolute favourite books of all time?
Yeah, I was 12, and I was a fan of Radio 4. A bit embarrassing for a 12-year-old, but there you go. And used to listen to Tony Hancock. He would be on at lunchtime on Radio 4. And one day my dad came in, Hancock wasn't on. He said, there's something you should listen to, because I know you like science fiction. It's this thing, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So I said, okay, yeah, whatever. And I sat down and I was completely hooked. So I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd heard.
Wow.
It's what I've been waiting all my life, all 12 years, I've been waiting for that moment. And
Wonderful.
And it kind of stayed with me ever since. I think as somebody who really liked sitcoms and comedy and who really liked science fiction, I was, the ideal pre-teen audience for the show.
Wow. So you were there at the time when it was going out live.
I think it was this
radio
rerun.
play first.
Yeah, I think first of all it was on at 10:30
okay.
when I was fast asleep, or listening to John Peel.
Okay.
Was slightly more cool. but Sunday lunchtimes were something else. Yeah.
Okay. Mark, your first experiences with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, please.
Yes, I was a little bit older, maybe 16, 17, and a friend said, you'll like this. I've got the series on cassette, so listen to this. And I was like, yeah, sure. Okay, give it a go. I was washing dishes in my parents' house, put the tape on in the little CD tape player, and I remember, I distinctly still remember being at the kitchen sink listening to all the talk about ape descendants, and I was sort of very, very, very quickly sort of hooked, and then just absolutely binged the entire episodes.
So this is quite interesting because both of you, that means, heard the radio play before you read the books.
Correct order.
Whereas I went straight into I went and bought the trilogy in 4 parts. I would have been somewhere around 14 or 15, I think. And I didn't finish reading it, but I did get through at least 2 of the books.
Yeah.
But I think the first page or 2, like the first few pages of that book are just, for me, and I think for a lot of, I don't think everyone who listens to the show is a nerd, but there's a lot of nerds out there who will identify with the fact that that is just comedy gold. And there is some part of nerd culture which this franchise has permeated through. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that in a while. But before we get to that, since we do have an academic on, Michael, can you talk to us about... Did you not know?
I think I've forgotten.
No. You've forgotten. I mean, you don't have to be too Zaphod Beeblebrox about it,
No.
but can you talk a bit about the environment that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy came into in the late 1970s? Because we've got Star Wars has just been released, but Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was being made during that time, so it was already in the works.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a huge resurgence of sci-fi during this time, right?
Yeah, I think it was already kind of peak sci-fi, the 70s. And one thing in my experience, I'm guessing in your experiences too, is a kind of science fiction childhood. So I grew up with Doctor Who, Star Trek, was completely besotted by Star Wars. It was the first film I saw twice at the cinema, because once was not enough. Hitchhikers, it's slotted into that that cultural moment, and there's a sort of permeation of science fiction in mainstream media at that moment. And so Hitchhikers is arriving in a crowded field. There's an argument. I know you haven't done Star Wars on this podcast yet. At least a possibility that Star Wars destroyed science fiction and replaced it with something else: space opera, romance, action adventure. And I think Hitchhikers is kind of more engaged, not with Star Wars, but with that kind of questioning the hypothetical mode of sci-fi in the 60s and 70s. It's kind of coming out of that more intellectual and less romantic version of what was going on. To me at the time, it all seemed one thing. I like Star Wars. I like this. Hitchhikers. Yeah. I like Doctor Who. And it's that moment. I think it is a kind of Close Encounters as well. I think is part of all that. And Hitchhikers fitted right in.
But it's very much like science fiction does play a role in society for holding our aspirations for the future as well as our anxieties of the present. And I think Hitchhikers does that really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the amount of allusions to mental health, I think, are really interesting. I think there are so many characters that are talking about how they are just trying to cope in this universe, and often baddies. There's a gun shootout. I think there's a number of these actually where they enter into quite a long dialogue about how both parties are feeling about the fact that they're in a gunfight. And there's there's two guys who the gang meet and who are very sad about having to be gun-toting, laser-pointing baddies.
Hey! I thought you said you didn't want to shoot us!
It isn't easy being a cop.
What did he say?
He said it isn't easy being a cop.
Well, surely that's his problem, isn't it?
I just thought so.
Hey, listen, I think we've got enough problems of our own with you shooting at us, so if you could avoid laying your personal problems on us as well, I think we'd probably find it easier to cope.
Now, see here, buddy. You're not dealing with any dumb, two-bit trigger-pumping morons with low hairlines, little piggy eyes, and no conversation. No. We're a couple of intelligent, caring guys who you'd probably like if you met us socially. That's right. I'm really sensitive.
And Arthur is having multiple existential crises throughout his time, with Ford. A thing that I've come back to time and time again, and it comes from the. So this was in the. I think it's actually in the first book, but it was near the end of the first radio series as well, where the gang hijack a ship, and it's hurtling back in time, and in the radio show it's one kind of ship, and in the in the TV show and in the book it's a different kind of ship. But either way, they're hurtling back in time, and the ship is screaming. It's making all sorts of noises, and all the klaxons are going off, and it's moving about all over the place. So suddenly sort of things start to calm down, and so Trillian asks, did you finally make sense of the controls? And Ford and Zaphod replied, no, we just stopped messing with them. We think clearly this ship has a better idea of where it's going than we do. And there's something about when you start looking into Buddhism and those sorts of aspects of whether it's spirituality or how we just deal with our mental health, the idea of relaxing control, it actually comes up in a lot of self-help books. And I don't think that's necessarily what Adams was going for that deep, but there are so many little analogies, little analogues that we can draw. and I keep finding them when I go back to the material. I just think, yeah, there's another aspect that so much of the Hitchhikers universe is actually quite a lot about mental health.
Yeah, and you say that he didn't intend that, but the fact that the front cover of the book is "Don't Panic." So The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is this fantastic book, and it's like that is going to be a big theme throughout the film, throughout the story. And so I think it was done on purpose. And there is this kind of constant, the philosophy that we have no control. And so in theory, we should be a bit more zen about everything.
Yeah.
I also think another element of the mental health issue is that we've got Marvin, the paranoid android, who is obviously very, very clinically depressed and very funny. And something that I haven't actually said publicly, but I think Zaphod Beeblebrox, who is the, I think
Chaos Engine.
People have been recently on social media and other places comparing him to Donald Trump. And I honestly think that's unfair.
Very unfair.
And I actually think Zaphod is quite ADHD coded. And I say this as someone who has been diagnosed with ADHD. Now, I think he does have a callousness to him and a kind of a lack of caring and all those kind of things. But, he's clever and he's charming and he's absolutely chaotic. And then there's that story, which I don't think is in the radio play, but is in the book, where he, as a child with Ford, he does some kind of dare and he goes off and he meets some space pirates. So I think that he has bravery and but
also tremendous cowardice because he wears those glasses at one point that shield you, that go black at the sign of any kind of danger.
Yes.
Yeah, which I can also understand. Yeah.
I mean,
So
I feel that Zaphod is a kind of image of Douglas Adams.
Oh,
really?
And Marvin is the counter. I mean, I can't psychoanalyze somebody I've never met, and I couldn't psychoanalyze him if I had met him. But I know that Douglas Adams struggled with depression, didn't he? He himself went through depressions, and that anecdote you just came up with, Aisha, I mean, from the book. He's also somebody who was sent away to boarding school at fairly young, I mean, not as young as some people, but fairly young age. I have a friend who went to boarding school who talks about boarding school survivors, that you're thrust into this world, everything is uncertain, strange. He's the parent of divorced, child of divorced parents at a time when that was fairly unusual in British society. And I feel there's a kind of wounded thing in Douglas Adams. It's coming out in Cool in Zaphod Beeblebrox, who I don't see as Trumpian. The guy who played him in the movie version said he was thinking of Bill Clinton as a kind of, as a way of kind of thinking about how to play the part. And he's much more kind of saxophone playing Bill Clinton. He feels that more that kind of sleazy character than a Trump to me. Yeah, it's a theory, at least.
It's an interesting theory. I don't know. I think when I've read about how Douglas Adams used to have like periods of feeling really unsure of himself and having that self-doubt in regards to his writing and things like that, I relate that more to, an Arthur Dent kind of character than I would to like a Zaphod who I don't think anyone on earth is like a Zaphod, are they? Really?
I feel I met a few.
Two heads?
Yeah.
Who has two heads?
Until we meet someone with 2 heads and 3 arms, I mean.
Not that true.
Who has their own spaceship.
Yes. But that kind of hedonist, I mean, I think of him as Zaphod, so he'll be Zaphod to me. But so Zaphod.
Zaphod is the right way to say it. As Mark, who sent us an email beforehand to let me know, because I do say Babelfish and I do say Zaphod, because I read the book and I did not hear anyone say those words. So
yes.
Zaphod and Babel, we will try to stay aligned with what the right, true way is.
And now people who are sending the emails can stop sending the emails.
Yes.
Yes.
You can retract
Don't send
your
me your
email.
emails. Yeah, retract
comments
it.
box. Yeah, I mean, so he's a kind of he's like a party animal, isn't he? I mean, that's part of it. That he's cool, and but he invented the gargle blaster and all that kind of stuff, and it's
so
president to be.
We also have to remember that there might be people listening who might have just read the book or might have just watched the film. So
yes.
The Pan-Galactic Gargle Blaster. What is that, Michael? Before you just go skimming
I think
over
Mark
it.
will know better than I do, but is it the second most impressive drink in
I think it's the best.
galaxy?
I think according to the guide.
Yes, according to the guide, this is like having your brain smashed out with a piece of lemon wrapped around a large gold brick.
Yes.
But in a good way, right?
But apparently in a good way, yes.
It's vodka and Red Bull. It's that kind of to the power of 200.
Yes.
And Zaphod Beeblebrox is the inventor of this drink.
He is. And the consumer of it, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I don't know, I think he's probably the most engaging character, no? Or do you have another favourite?
Arthur, for me.
Oh, Arthur.
I'm a natural Arthur. I identify.
You identify with Dent.
I identify. I like that. I identify as Dent. Sorry. I think I go more Ford.
Oh.
There's something about Ford that I mean, he's got aspects of Zaphod in him, in that he just, in his own words, wants to get drunk and dance with girls. But he's got a degree of, and there's a sort of there's a rugged, calloused over, and I don't mean callous as in, you know, when you get calluses on your fingers. He's got a sort of because he's been around and he's moved about the galaxy. There's a ruggedness to his emotions when he says to Arthur, you know, when you lose someone, you don't talk about them. You just get blind drunk, and then that's when you talk about them. And there's something romantic, I think, about Ford that I quite like, and he's very literal. There's an autistic maybe coding, I think, in Ford, because, you know, he's very interested in humanity, you know, according to the books. And this is one I've never really loved as an assessment of Ford, but according to the books, he landed on Earth and assumed that thought that cars were the most dominant life form,
and hence his name.
And partly hence his name, because he thought it would be nicely inconspicuous. And so, you know, he's in the film, he's saved by Arthur, you know, because he's stood in the middle of the road with his thumb out trying to say hi. I don't know how much I like that, but I do like a lot of things about Ford. And there is, like I said, a sort of a romanticism about him that
I mean, being someone who helps to write like this amazing book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, wandering around, learning, you know, and also I quite like the way that Ford is like a bridge between Zaphod and Arthur. Like quite often,
I think I get what you mean, Mark. And I think of all the characters, he's the one who could have been a Doctor Who. And in the TV series, I mean, his clothes a little bit Doctor-esque in the 70s, 80s mode of the Doctor, at least. And again, like the Doctor, he, as you said, Asia, is kind of, he's the mediating figure between outer space, about which we know nothing, and Earth, you know, where we're at home. So he plays a similar role, I think, in the series.
I think it's after they go to the restaurant at the end of the universe in either the book or the radio play. I've consumed so much stuff on this recently, so please forgive me if I don't know exactly where I'm getting my stuff from. But when they come out and they want to steal that large, absolutely devoid of light car, and you know, Ford's a bit like, should we nick it? Kind of like he's not like
no, he goes for
he's not opposed to it,
No.
And as whereas I think Arthur would never do something like that, and he'd probably get really kind of like stressed out about it. So
he's very suburban, Arthur. I think in a kind of and
I also think that when we find out that Earth's entry in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is it goes from harmless to mostly harmless, and Arthur's quite upset about that, but he personifies that so much, and I think like we as humans, you know, I mean the world's an absolute mess right now as far as I'm concerned, and it doesn't seem harmless at all, but on that kind of larger scale of absolute universe,
it's probably fine.
We're not going to harm. We're not even going to harm.
The harm is inflicted on itself, not the galaxy.
Yes,
absolutely. And that kind of personifies Arthur as well. Sadly, like he can just be, you know, really stressed out. And that bit where Zaphod says to him, "Oh, you know, don't worry, they'll replace your brain with like a false brain." And you're like, "Yeah, he'll just." What does he say? He says something like, "He'll just say what can I have some tea or
Yeah,
something like that?
Yeah, that's the keys to his character.
Yeah.
But in that kind of 1970s
Suburban,
kind of,
middle of the road,
Village Green society.
class kind of, absolutely.
the Kinks, the kind of and I think a lot of the comedy of it is the comedy of bathos. That you have somebody who's worried about his house being demolished by the local council and pints of beer and wearing the dressing gown, and then there is the universe, and kind of with aliens and supernovas, and then you put those two things into touch with each other. And so I think Arthur, in that sense, is that's why I like him so much. Is kind of I'm at home here. I'm not at home on the Crab Nebula or whatever. And so I feel like his desire for tea, his desire for comfort, coziness,
cricket,
a towel,
and I think that there's a point where that the towel is introduced later, but I think isn't there a point where he says, oh yeah, when the Babel fish, and I've said it correctly, when the Babel fish is about to go into his ear, he says something along the lines of, I'm sure I'd feel a lot better about this if I could just see a packet of cornflakes.
Yes.
It's like something familiar, something from Earth, something that's familiar. And I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Which reminds me of one of my favourite lines, and it was such a lovely little surprise when I heard it. And it's so brilliantly played by Simon Jones, which is, one of the reasons I love the radio series is there's bits and subtleties and jokes and things that only work in the radio series, but there's the line, it's at times like this, when I'm stuck in a Vogon airship, about to be chucked out of an airlock, that I really wished I'd listened to what my mother said when I was young.
Yes.
And Ford says, what did she say? I don't know, I didn't listen. Mwah!
Yeah, perfection. And some of the lines are so clever. You do wonder, like, did he invent them? Because it makes you have, like.
Do you know what that makes me think of? It makes me think of how bands, their first album. I
just want to say he's very clever again.
Yeah. Bands are so often their first album is a culmination of all of their years of making music and learning how to make music and writing songs, and then everything after that is basically sort of what it's like to be famous, or maybe not successful. And so I wonder whether, because he had a lot of other projects and things, because how much of this I don't know, but my understanding is that the story of the hyperspace bypass comes from an early draft of a series that he was writing called Ends of the Earth. And so this was one of the ways that the Earth ended was by someone driving a hyperspace bypass through it. And so I can't remember why I mentioned that now. I'm sure there was a very good reason. I think
you're saying, because I'm trying to say how clever he is, and you're trying to say that it was basically his first album.
Absolutely. And so I wonder. I'm sure there's bits and things he's picked up from people, but I'd love to think that so much of that was just in there waiting to come out.
Yeah, and it's almost every single line. So, like, if he nabbed a little bit here and there, then it's okay. But I wanted to, since you did mention this kind of first album situation, so Douglas Adams came up with the idea, which he even said later of himself, that it's such a myth that he said it so often that he now believes that it's true, that he came up with the idea for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy while lying drunk in a field in Innsbruck, Austria. And the reason I also want to mention that is that I've also been to Innsbruck, and so I have something in common with Douglas Adams.
Nice.
So he had a copy of the Hitchhiker's Guide to Europe, and he came up with the idea in 1971, and it wasn't until 1978 that was actually 1977 it was commissioned, 1978 it came onto the air. So he wasn't that young. He was born in 1952, so he's actually, he's approaching his late 20s. Oh, late 20s.
It's young to me.
Yes.
God, it's young now. Yep. Yeah. And so that happens in 78, that goes on the radio. 79, the first novel is published, and then the rest of them come along within short gaps. And then the film, which he tried to get made for decades, sadly comes out 4 years after he passes away. He passes away in 2001 at the age of 49, and the film comes out in 2005. So that's just a little timeline of the Hitchhiker's Guide. Although there's so many more offshoots. I want to quickly ask what you think the broad appeal is, because this is such an international phenomena. and it sold over 15 million books worldwide. What do you think the broad appeal is? Michael, let's go to you first.
I think I'll start off by saying what I think it's not, if you know what I mean. So there's this great moment in Star Wars where Luke is kind of, mooning around, to use a science fiction verb, on his home planet Tatooine, and he wants to escape and have adventures. And you see two suns setting on the horizon, and that kind of sense of wonder that's in that Star Wars moment. You're in a world with two suns. And there's a similar moment in Magathea,
which also has two suns.
But there is no sense of, I think he's not romantic, although it's the comedy of, it's like Alice in Wonderland. It's the comedy of absurdity, of logic. You take a kind of crazy premise and then you see where it goes. So all that kind of aspect of science fiction, which is really about kind of being having a sense of wonder, being amazed by things.
But Arthur Dent at that point is amazed by that double sunset. But we then have the comedy of Marvin just being like, well, it's rubbish. Yeah. And so it's interesting because and they're both and that's the thing, it's such a global phenomenon, but it feels so British. Like both Marvin. Yeah. And admittedly, if you listen to radio play, everyone's got, well, no, apart from those people who you talked about, Mark, who were shooting their guns and saying, no, we're lovely people. We don't want to shoot you, but we're going to anyway. They have these kind of faux American accents in the play. Apart from that, everyone else has like a very English accent, but it feels like a very British sense of humour. It is. But I think Arthur does express that wonder. But then it is briefly, it's like it's the way that we kind of go, it's wonderful, it's sunny, and then it's like, oh God, when's the sun gonna, like we have this kind of thing where we might be happy for a little bit, but then we'll just, we'll kind of try and criticize things and kind of bring us back down to earth because maybe it's because of the weather. I don't know why. It's a cultural thing.
It's always raining in space. But raining. I think I think the reason, you've already said in a way, Aisha, I think it's just extremely funny. And it looks easy to do. You just think of something stupid and crazy and you see where it goes. But actually it's extremely hard to do. And I think almost no one has done it as well as he did it. Yeah. And the reason why it's popular is, I think it is a particularly English kind of humor, but it's the kind of humor that really does travel. It's the humor of absurdity, the humor of finding the world strange. When you think about it, things we accept as normal, suddenly you get this kind of slantwise look at them where you realize how stupid it all is. Digital watches, or whatever it is. And I think that's just travels and it works really well. And that's the major reason why it's so great.
Yeah. And I love the little detours he goes on, like just when you're reading the book. And then suddenly he'll be talking about, something completely different, or he'll dive into something, or the moment that Arthur says, he talks about his lifestyle.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that, Mark? I feel like you'll do far more justice than I can.
So Arthur says,
I seem to be having this tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle.
And he's talking to one of the, if not the best named character in any form of literature anywhere. And it only works in a Southern English accent. So it doesn't work in my accent. So I will do it in the Southern English accent. Slarty Bartfast. So he's talking to Slarty Bartfast.
And he doesn't want to say his name at the beginning, does he?
No, he doesn't.
On the radio player.
Understandably.
Yeah, my name is not important. And he, so Arthur's, ruminating. I seem to have this problem with my lifestyle. And just as he says that, a freak wormhole in space and time opens up and carries his words thousands of light years back to two warring tribes that are next to each other, that are head to head across a table, both in their resplendent in their bejeweled battle shorts. Which, to make a brief detour, if I can, that's one of the reasons I think it's so funny, is that so many of the jokes come at you from the side. Almost blink and you'll miss them. I think it's one of the reasons you can go back to it, because there are so many of those like bejeweled battle shorts, and then it just moves on. Like it's so many of those are just thrown away. these two parties are arguing over the table, and then suddenly this is the Vlahergs and the Gugugvunts, I think.
Wow. Yes. That's why I knew Mark would do a better job than I would.
This is why you're here, Mark.
I've even got it written down, but I was like, I don't want to say these words.
The Vlahergs and the Gugugwants. And it so happens that the phrase, I seem to have this problem with my lifestyle, in the Vlaherg tongue, they had an offensive remark about somebody's mother, if I remember correctly. And so and so because it's so horrible, both parties, armies team up and tear across thousands of light years and decades or hundreds of years to finally find the source of the offending remark, and they land on Earth, where to a catastrophic miscalculation of scale, the entire fleet is swallowed by a small dog.
Yes.
And again, it's just like there's no wind up.
It's just thrown in there.
Joke.
There's no
wind up. There's no like ramp down. There's no ramp up. There's no warning. It's just these jokes are just bam, and they're so sudden and just absolutely incredible. And I mean, there's the imagination of creating such a vast sci-fi landscape. Such a vast world, so populous. He's got so many little. There's the jokes, but then there is so much colour, so much depth.
And that's got nothing to do with our main characters. And
nothing.
It's just absolute side detours.
Yes.
And that are very funny. Have no, like, you're not going to see them again. It's just done. It's a whole story. And that's why I wonder, like, although he says he's a comedy writer and not a science fiction writer, but I just wonder if any other vehicle, like any other genre, could have carried his style, because it's just so, like, having the whole universe and everything in it and every possible permutation offers him this kind of playground that he may not have had in, like, like a film noir, or not noir, film noir, but like a noir thriller or crime.
Dirk Gently, I guess. But,
sorry.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It's the way kind of jokes are quite similar to science fiction, and that's his great discovery. Is they both depend on that kind of slantwise what if. That kind of, you think you're going here, but then you suddenly go there.
Speculative,
It's very Monty Python.
It is very Monty Python.
And obviously that's really almost a key influence. And again, they had a problem. I love Douglas. I mean, this sounds like I don't, but I absolutely adore him. But he's not very good at storytelling.
And so that's the thing. Like this book, I reread it. I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it, and I actually went, well, the actual plot, there's nothing.
There isn't one.
You're not like, oh, that's a really clever plot. He's so clever, but he's just written. It's funny. It's funny, and the plot is inconsequential to the fact that it's just such a great book to read. It's such a great experience to read.
It's a thin skeleton to hang a load of jokes on.
It is. In the end, the kind of the meaning of life just dissipates into the wrong question to the stupid answer.
There's no happy ending. No. And it's maybe one of the reasons I really like zombie fiction is because when zombie fiction is done right, there is no happy ending. It's meant to be hopeless. That's not usually my personality. But I was rewatching the film, and I'd as a kid when I went to, well, not as a kid, but as a lad in his early 20s, so basically a kid, when I went to see it when it came out, I was loving so much of it and happy with so much of it, but then was kind of gutted by some of the digressions. And as I've got older and rewatched it, I forgive a lot of that, partly because I know they were his. It wasn't as if they were taken from him and some Hollywood exec made a different film. They were his ideas. But the pacing of the film and it needed a storyline. It needed someone to go and get a gun. Because you have to go and get a thing, the only thing, it doesn't follow the straight up meeting of the mentor, crossing the threshold, all that kind of stuff that traditional stories are quote unquote supposed to have, but it still had to have a narrative arc in order for it to be a satisfying film. And there's something in the fact that we can take it in a book, we can take it in a long radio series, we can take it in a TV series, and I hope we will take it again. But we can't take it in a film.
No. And the film, I haven't watched the film since it came out because I was so disappointed that I can't myself go back to it.
Yeah.
But as I remember it ends in a very kind of open-ended way. The kind of to be continued. only it wasn't continued. And is that right? I mean,
not well. It ends. So I'm going to stand up for it in a sense, because there are so many good gags in that film that are extra. That there's so many good things in that film. However, the way the plot sort of wraps up, I think like you, very disappointed, because essentially, spoiler for the film, Earth gets basically put back together again as exactly as it was. And as I was watching that, as the age of 22, I was like, you can't do that. That's not how this ends. It's supposed to be, a little bit bleak, whatever.
Yeah.
But to its credit, Arthur says, I'm done with this Earth, and goes off, and he starts to have adventures. So it's very much open-ended in terms of let's all let the Hollywood viewing public be okay and satisfied and not have an existential crisis, because it's okay, the Earth is still here. It was just a story. But at the same time, he does go off and then have it keeps it open to potentially more adventures with the restaurant at the end of the universe. A gag that they messed up in the film.
Yes.
But that's fine.
There's a great line about, for your American viewers, I love America, but Americans love a tragedy with a happy ending.
Yeah,
that they lighten it up.
Yeah,
so the Americans remake The Vanishing,
film,
the Scary
really.
Film, any film, and they make it nice.
Or The Office,
or
they
The
remake
Office.
the Office, and it becomes
I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of absurd humor, because the philosophy of absurdism, which is kind of like adjacent to nihilism. So nihilism's like nothing has any meaning, and absurdism is nothing has any meaning, but we're going to fight that because we're human. And that's as in we accept that it has no meaning, but we're going to spend our lives struggling against the fact that it has no meaning. And I think that's really central to the sense of humor and the whole story. I think this idea that we have absolutely no control over what happens to us. And that goes back to what you were saying, Mark, about it being a Zen idea. Like the Zen is the ideal, but all the way through, people are thrashing and trying to fight those things. And luckily, because we're with the heroes, either the infinite probability drive comes and saves them, or Marvin ends up talking to a computer that gets so depressed it kills itself. So things happen to the benefit of our people. It's a very interesting and slightly deeper than, like, yes, we've got the skeleton and we've got the humor, but there is a philosophy that runs deeply through the whole thing.
So we haven't talked much about, and I wanted to talk about it, the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation.
Yes, please do.
Because when I was listening to the radio series, Microsoft was very much in the they were dominant, and also everything was a bit rubbish with computers. Windows.
We need to know what year this is circa.
The latest of 90s, heading into the 21st century. So we're talking about Windows 98 and Windows 2000 and Windows ME and the blue screen of death and everything just not really working properly. I used to talk about this on our little podcast, but he wasn't writing about Microsoft then. He may have been writing about IBM, but I don't think so. I just think, and it goes back to your question, Aisha, about the broad appeal. There's something so pervasive about the idea of just rubbishy companies. And there was something about the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation that was so tonally on with so much of the stuff. It's like, you got 90% of the way there. You were building this genuine people personality robots, and they want to do all these things for you. You've got this machine that makes anything you want. The only problem is it all just tastes not exactly like tea. Like it's the last mile, that they mess up. And their customer service is terrible. Go stick your head in a pig, being the translation of the customer service motto for the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation.
But also, it's the biggest. I think the famous line is that it's the marketing department, which I've got here. A bunch of mindless jerks will be the first against the wall when the revolution comes. So that's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But I just love the fact that they have one that's sent back to them from the future, and that is exactly what happened.
Yes.
And I think the reason it's still relevant is now we have like a completely different kind of Silicon Valley to kind of when this came out.
Yeah.
Like it would have been non-existent. You know, Steve Jobs was probably pottering about getting his act together, whatever. But it's so different. And now we've got all these tech bros and that, you know, I mean, Elon Musk claims to love this book, but does he know what happened to the marketing department?
He's not allowed. He's not allowed to love this book.
I don't want to allow it. Like, how can you do that? And then, like, I don't understand. And did he read it? Because does he know that the marketing department of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation were a bunch of mindless jerks who were the first against the wall when the revolution comes? Do you know that?
Learned from the lessons of the future.
Yes. I know you want to talk about the legacy of the show later, but I think one legacy is Silicon Valley in a way. That kind of and I am Elon Musk can enjoy Hitchhikers. Good for you, Elon.
No, he's not allowed.
Peter Thiel can enjoy Lord of the Rings, but it's those in a way. It's these slightly scary tech lords were the nerds who were the audience of the show.
It's like they're reading the wrong thing from the book. They seem to like these books. I wonder if they just read. Did they not read it the same way? You know, do they look at certain characters and go, "Those are the ones I want to be"? And you're like, I don't think that's what you're meant to take away from this, Elon.
Yeah. Sauron.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like he's not the good guy.
No.
The famous tweet that I wanted to mention was a sci-fi author. In my book, I invented the Torment Nexus as a cautionary tale. Tech company. At long last, we have created the Torment Nexus. From classic sci-fi novel, don't create the Torment Nexus. I think that sums up sci-fi.
It does.
Yes. Can we talk, before we go to legacy, about all the wonderful gadgetry that he comes up with? And the first one, I think, is absolute genius. It's not gadgetry because it's an alien organic life form, but the Babelfish is such a clever way of overcoming the fact that when we do, and I don't care all the people saying it's never going to happen, let me dream. When we do go into space and meet all of these alien species, we will need a way to kind of communicate with them. And the one thing that doesn't work is when you've got the Babelfish in your ear or you've got the Star Trek Universal Translator, people's lips do not magically start moving aligned with what you're hearing.
No.
So really the whole thing should look dubbed. But apart from that, it's such a clever invention.
Yeah. Universe speaks English. It's a nice, it's basically, we're back to what it's like to travel around Europe with the
cup of tea.
Lonely Planet.
Yeah.
It's
a wonderful idea. And I think there's so much, there's quite a few of those where, and it was Douglas Adams who really got me thinking about the nature of an infinite universe. I think a combination of him and Pratchett. And the idea that in an infinite universe, and I spoke to a proper intelligent person about this, and they were like, no, that's not what it means. But in my mind, this is what it means. That in an infinite universe, everything is infinitely possible. And so there are mattresses that are grown and they spend their days flomping about and flolloping and regarding the wetness, and then they're caught and dried and sold. There are all manner of other things.
Yeah, so let's go to your favourite bits of tech. Michael, you can go first. I've taken the Babelfish. You can't have it. I should have let you go first, but it's mine.
Well, it has to be Marvin. I mean, it's in a world where our robot overlords are, I guess, starting to march towards us, if they're kind of depressed figures like Marvin, I will feel reassured, at least, that they're not going to get, they won't be getting us. Because I think you're right, Mark, kind of that the technology is pretty inept, a lot of it. Things go wrong a lot. I keep worrying about AI, and then I try to get a drink from the kind of the drinks machine at work, and I can't. It gives me hot chocolate, not coffee, and I think we're probably safe for the moment.
Yeah, and I don't think Marvin would do that. I mean, he'd complain about giving you the right drink, but he wouldn't give you the wrong drink.
He would.
I think for me, I've got to go with the infinite improbability drive. I think space travel. At an instant, it's an interesting idea about the pollution that is created, which is essentially things like the fact that when you blip between one end of the galaxy and another, you might cause the sudden untenable existence of a bowl of petunias and a large sperm whale.
And it's brilliant.
Another thing that no one made too much fuss about was the fact that against all probability, a sperm whale had suddenly been called into existence some miles above the surface of an alien planet. And since this is not a naturally tenable position for a whale, this innocent creature had very little time to come to terms with its identity as a whale before it had to come to terms with suddenly not being a whale anymore.
You sort of listen to it and you go, yeah, that sounds legit. Like, he's used lots of scientific words there. I think that probably does make sense. I'm sure, but I think it's got to be that. It would just
for our listeners, since you did mention the explanation, we must warn everyone that this is definitely not hard science fiction.
No.
Because let's go into the principle behind the infinite probability drive. So the principle of generating small amounts of finite improbability by simply hooking the logic circuits of the Bamble-Weenie 57 sub-Mason brain to an atomic vector plotter suspended in a strong Brownian motion producer, say a nice hot cup of tea, were well understood. And then it goes on to explain how the infinite probability drive is different slightly. But it's just, I love the fact that it's just, he's put these ridiculous scientific explanations for things that are definitely not scientific at all.
Well, like how you can extrapolate every piece of matter from a small piece of fairy cake. And thus you can build the total perspective vortex.
Which is one of my favourites, actually. I should have said that.
Yeah.
Although it's not in the first book, but it is one of my favourites because, and admittedly, I think that could be why I have a soft spot for Zaphod Beeblebrox, because when I go out into the desert or if I go into a field and I see the majesty of the sky and the universe, people go, oh, I feel so insignificant. I don't. I feel like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, I feel really special.
Ace guy.
Yeah. Admittedly, you end up finding out that Zaphod Beeblebrox he hasn't just survived it because the whole world was built around him or something like that.
He's in a pocket universe. Yes. I think at that point he's in a pocket universe, which actually does all revolve around him. Yep.
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly give a shout out because when we come up with aliens, they're always like humanoid or humanoid adjacent, apart from a few random exceptions. And one of my favourite ones is the Huluvu from The Hitchhiker's Guide, which is a Huluvu is a super intelligent shade of the colour blue. And what even makes it more wonderful is that when they're all dressed up for the Heart of Gold spaceship reception, this is what it says. All except the Huluvu were resplendent in the multicoloured ceremonial lab coats. The Huluvu had been temporarily refracted into a freestanding prism for the occasion. It's just wonderful. We can't think of life forms that aren't like us or like something on Earth. And he just comes up with a life form that is the colour blue. It's wonderful.
I think that's also a wonderful thing about having originally written, and this is the case with books as well. Had he written the book first, it would have been the same. But writing for the radio or writing for the theatre of the mind means that you can create far more interesting things that the imagination gets to play with. Then that make it very difficult to put on film. But he can just toss off a line like he did, because the Huluvu don't really exist in the radio. He just says a super intelligent shade of the color blue, and then he goes into further detail in the book, which makes me think, okay, at this point, I've got to actually now think about if one of these things is going to exist, what is the physics of it, and how can we see a super, and it's his ability. Then he gets to explore that, that in greater detail.
Yeah. And the mice. I mean, the mice are great aliens in a way. That we're sharing the planet with,
because they're not
mice.
They're pan-dimensional beings.
Yes, appearing as mice in our dimension,
lulling us into a false sense of security because we're not in control.
No.
I don't know if both of you prefer the radio play, but there's so much more in the book in terms of that you learn more about the characters, and then you have the extra information, and he's so erudite that it's a beauty to read. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm always going to enjoy the book more. I don't know if I could enjoy a film as much as that when that's the way the film would be written. Like, you can write for the screen, but this isn't a show don't tell. He's telling you all the way through.
It's all tell, isn't it?
It's all tell.
It's all tell.
Yeah. I wanted to quickly mention that there's also, like, the fact that we didn't have tablets, and the fact that we now have, I had one of my listeners mentioned that AirPods are now going to be offering like translation services.
Yes.
And also, when I was reading the book, the Tri-D camera, which is basically these cameras that float around Zaphod, sorry. And when they and they transmit that image to 3 billion people. I mean, that's kind of a front, that's kind of social media as we know it now. So there's a lot of stuff in there that, although it's not hard sci-fi, it did come to pass.
Definitely.
Let's go on to the legacy of the work. Michael.
I think, the big legacy is that it's in a lot of people's heads. You could say 42 to almost anyone, and they will, in answer to a question, and know what you mean. It's a bit like, so I think my generation, they memorized The Life of Brian. There wasn't a moment from that movie that people didn't have, kind of at their fingertips. I think Hitchhikers had a similar thing, that it just became something that got incorporated into the imaginations of, several generations of people. And that is the ultimate legacy. I think there's a kind of Silicon Valley legacy. I feel it's a little bit that he was kind of a precursor of the new atheist moment as well. And there's a kind of, there's a hereditary thing going directly from Hitchhikers into Richard Dawkins. He introduced Richard Dawkins to his wife, Lalla Ward, who was in the Doctor Who, program that he wrote, City of Death. And the humour, I think, is quite Christopher Hitchens-esque a little bit. That kind of skepticism, the anti-authoritarian thing in Adams.
And he did describe himself as a radical atheist.
He did. I think, in a way.
Make sure people knew that he wasn't agnostic.
No, he was really, he's a Sam Harris plus jokes of his time. And I think that is that's a legacy, definitely. And I think the Elon Musk thing, we feel ambivalent about it, I think. But that's also there. But also just that it changed people's minds by expanding the possibilities of jokes, the possibilities of how you think about things. That's a great legacy to have. And, good on you, Douglas, basically.
Brilliant. Mark, legacy.
I love the idea of, and I'm seriously thinking about when I'm going to do this, of getting a copy of the book and giving it to my youngest nephew, because I don't think my eldest nephew would enjoy it. But I think my youngest nephew would, because he's got the similar kind of brain that I have. Too many projects. He's not even in big school yet, and he's got too many projects. And there's the ability to just blow open the doors of imagination, and to do it with this, to introduce him to a type of humor that he hasn't yet necessarily identified with, to show him that that smart people can be really funny and do amazing things, and that it's very heady, it's very of the brain, not the body. This work, and for any kid that spends more time in his head, perhaps than his wise, to be able to give that as a gift to pass on and say, you need to read this because I think it will open up new things for you, and it will create sparks of imagination. It's not like anything else. It's not a Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's not, it's completely new and completely different, and you haven't encountered anything like this yet. And I think that, I don't know if that's legacy, but that is the gift that I think that's how it will maintain a legacy, because we get to give this as a gift to each new generation and hope that they love it as much as we did.
I've asked you both to bring a recommendation for our listeners. So what would you like to pair?
Can I go first?
With?
Because I'm worried that Mark has chosen the same thing. And then I will.
Okay.
So I'm going to choose Slaughterhouse-Five. By Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh, wow.
It's quite grim about the bombing of Dresden and so on, but it is very, very funny. And it has a lot of the absurdity, and I think it's the thing that I think of, apart from Douglas Adams, that really most successfully married together science fiction and comic writing. And it's very short. It's absolutely amazing. If you haven't read it, head to the bookshop now. And I think it's in the kind of intellectual absurdist. I think the world ends in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and no one sheds a tear. You could superficially think there's not much heart in it, but I think actually there's a kind of deep in the absurdity, in the futility. There's a lot of heart in that series, and a lot of heart in Kurt Vonnegut too. So those are the two things that I think of as connected.
Okay, wonderful. Mark?
I'm going to go with The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett, which is the first Discworld book. It is such a great next place to start. I think there is a passing of the baton. It's entirely different. It's got the bones of sci-fi, but it's fantasy. But when I say the bones of sci-fi, what I mean is he does similar kind of things. He will to Adams, in that he will talk about things like inspiration as being a particle, and it could just as easily hit a person or it could hit a brick. And at one point, inspiration does hit a brick. They're very formulaic. Once you discover the formula, you get into it and you realize what the formula is. But absolutely incredible, and I think a really nice next step.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Great. That's it for this episode. If you want to find out what I'm covering next episode, please check the show notes, as I haven't quite decided yet. A huge thank you to those of you that support the show. And if you would like to support the show, there's a few ways you can do that. First of all, you can leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcasting app. Secondly, you can tell the people about it or share the podcast, which is apparently very important in getting a podcast known. Lastly, if you wanted to get ad-free versions of the podcast, you can head over to my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/every sci-fi film, and there you can get ad-free versions of the podcast for $3 or £3 a month. Thank you so much to all of my Patreon subscribers, and thank you for listening. That's all for this episode. Bye-bye.